Because I forget stuff.
Somebody's back there.
I'm muted.
You should just mute.
Somebody's not.
Yeah, maybe mute.
Mine is muted. Says it is. There's a big red X over there.
Then Nancy, if you mute. His reverb with us.
Not an expert by any means. Back now, we're good.
Is it coming out of the speaker?
Sounds like it's coming in from the speaker.
Can you hit the mic?
Should we-
Okay, my volume's down. See if that
Is it
works.
transcribing my voice now?
Yes, now it's transcribing.
Are we getting feedback?
I think so.
Still transcribing?
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay. All right, are we good? Keep going here?
Sure.
Okay, let's call to order the Citizens Weed Advisory Board meeting for March 27th, 2025. Present are Jim Fitzmaurice, Sheila Grother, Nancy Willis, and staff. Excuse me. First item of business, I'd like to, we have approval of the minutes. Have you guys had a chance to look at the minutes?
Did not.
I'm okay with
Okay, I had one question.
it.
Julie, on the minutes you had in number 4, you had questioned Nancy Willis on time frame to complete work, and I don't know what that means.
When were the minutes sent? I'll look back through. Oh, I got it right here. I just got
They were
it.
sent about 3 days ago now.
Oh. It was a question you had, I think, not a question of something you said.
Did it
Okay,
have anything to do with the MOUs possibly?
I don't know, can we just maybe
Strike it?
strike it since I'm not sure what exactly that means?
Let me look at it real quick. Wrong one.
Or is it America the Beautiful grant? Regarding
Was
that?
it, on number 5, Nancy Willis on the time frame to complete the work? It's number 4.
Number 4.
It's under
the
number
third- Third bullet.
Yeah, like 1, 2, 3, go bullet down on 5. Yeah, I have it on 5, you have it on 4, I guess. Yeah, you had a question on the time frame that we had to complete the America the Beautiful grant work.
Okay,
That was
so
your
maybe we
question.
could just add that
Oh,
that's what it was.
So it's just
And what-
worded wrong because it was a question you posed.
Okay,
So
so
instead
yeah,
of her questioning you,
and just to correct what that was and what the answer was.
Okay,
And then I guess, it's up to the board here, since Sheila, you haven't had a chance to review it. We could table it or, I don't
I'm
know.
sure you could just go ahead. With
Well, then I would entertain a motion.
I would move.
9 seconds.
Great, all those in favor or opposed? All those first in favor?
Hi.
Aye, great.
So who are your official board members? Is the county employees ad hoc? I mean, how is your board?
we're staff
It's-
liaisons.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a 5-member board, with John Humphreys also.
Mhm.
And then we have that 5th seat open, which is an item to discuss here in a minute. And if we have more people interested, and I realize it's an upcoming agenda item, so maybe we'll just a second. So moving on, which is exactly that next item, after we're got, the open board seat discussion, and, so we do have an application for Suzanne Chevins to join the board, and then I understand there's maybe some other interest. It's a 5-member board, but, just opening it up before we discuss, it does say in the state statutes that it's a 40-acre landowner requirement, but there is no penalties if you don't have that. So I guess as a board, I would like to discuss that because I think we all feel like we're happy to have anybody who wants to come join our board and maybe, open the thought to alternates. Bring anybody in that wants to come as far as I'm
I'm
concerned.
glad you're following all the rules. However, I mean, back when I was doing this, we had up to, I think probably my biggest board was maybe 15.
Awesome.
But that was the only official representatives were the landowners. So I had, probably 5 or 6 that qualified under that 40 acres. And then my representatives from Forest Service, BLM, NRCS, the towns, et cetera, were non-voting board members. So, I mean, it was a big room sometimes, you know, full of people.
Which would be wonderful if we could
And,
get a room full of people.
yeah, and it was mostly, and I think your board is probably, you know, a little bit different. And I don't want to be that person that's always going, well, this is the way we used to do it, because that has driven me crazy on other boards. But it was more a way of sending information out into the community, was by having, you know, all these other entities represented. And, you know, pulling some information in as well. But, you know, if you could get a rancher, you know, who wants to talk to his neighbors, and, you know, somebody from I had each municipality for quite a while. It was just a way of sharing more information more than an official, you know, agendized, meeting. And it was, I think that worked really well. It probably wasn't perfect according to Robert's rules and all of those, you know, things that are a little more restrictive. But it really worked.
Well, I think, you know, we're just a little advisory board. So, I guess I would like to see what everybody else's opinion is, but I think my kind of thoughts are more communication, the better.
Right, and I think having somebody from the US Forest Service and the BLM would be wonderful, but considering the current climate,
Yeah.
I'm not sure that's gonna happen.
Very fine.
current cuts,
Federal-
federal cuts,
Mhm.
federal budget cuts, personnel cuts.
I mean, yeah, Brian's gone, and
Yeah,
that was without much fanfare.
right.
I know, we didn't even know he was gone.
Yeah.
As far as, town of Norwood, town of Telluride, I mean, that might be more achievable at this
Mhm.
point than the federal counterparts. And I certainly, I'm very open to, information sharing and, discussing that with, other entities. But I think we're doing really well right now to have the board that we do have, considering where we've come from. So I'm very happy with it. And, I do support Suzanne. She sounds like she's very, eager and happy to be on the board and could contribute. So I do support that.
Well, and if
Even though it's not a large landowner, so.
Right. No, and Sheila, because you also mentioned that your advisory board, you mentioned that at the last meeting in December too. So is that, because like when the county commissioners set this up a few years ago, it was pretty straightforward, like we want 5, this is a 5-member board, blah, blah, blah. So when you were running the board or managing the board, was that also under the auspices of the county commissioners and how they requested it to be set up?
At the time, when the WEEP program started, I'm giving you just like this little tiny history, was 93. And all I did that first couple of years was basically mapped weeds on paper maps, on quad maps, and with layers of Mylar. I mean, it was very simple 93 kind of technology. And then by 96, we started contracting out some of the spraying, mostly on, or maybe exclusively on county property. And that was on both San Miguel and West Montrose counties. And then San Miguel and Montrose County got into one of their, infamous pissing matches. Don't do that. But anyway, so in 99, when we bought the first spray truck, we separated. And West Montrose County basically had nothing for several years in there. And then that's when we started doing our own roads, and then we started doing some work for CDOT, some work for Forest Service, BLM, all the various entities. And then we picked up a couple of contracts with resource mining, and what is the acronym for mining?
MSHA.
Yeah, not then. Anyway, anything could be different now. So then we started having these contracts out into the bigger entities, and that's where the majority of our funding came from. So I created the board from whole cloth, just following what the state guidelines were. And the county had very little to do with it, actually. Most of the money came from other sources. And Art Goodtimes was my commissioner, and he attended a good share of the meetings. Were we, your guys are obviously under some different guidelines.
That's what I'm wondering, is if the state guidelines.
Right,
changed.
that's what I was asking.
It has to be in the state statutes. It says how many people, I'd have to
Right.
double check that.
Well, that's what was referenced when it was initially established.
That's,
And it
Does
could be,
does it just
yeah.
say it has to have this many people, or it just has to have a minimum of this many people?
Yeah, I think
Right.
that's what it said.
I would have
What
to
it
double
used
check.
to
I don't remember off
Okay.
the top of my.
Yeah,
And then at some point after I left, the county commissioners just appointed themselves the advisory board.
right.
So that would have been after 13.
Okay.
So, because I think that board fell apart.
Well, we do have Suzanne Chevins in the mix, who expressed an interest at least a month ago, maybe 2. And we've sort of just had her waiting in the wings while we pursued a large landowner or multiple large landowners. I reached out to a couple of people. Commissioner Galena Gleason reached out to a few people. with no success. So we feel we kind of pursued that to the best of our ability. Whereas we then were talking about just appointing Suzanne since she has expressed an interest and she's also the county communications coordinator. So she helps us with press releases, getting stories in the newspaper, especially when Julie and Greg work on our monthly noxious weed of the month.
Mhm.
So we figured she would be a great attribute
So
in
would she
addition
be
to the board,
A board member or a county representative?
a board member. Because, yeah, the county reps are Julie, Greg, myself, and then Julie's new assistant, noxious weed manager.
We're bouncing around an opportunity to combine the two counties in some way, where we could get some landowners that are in Montrose County to be on the board. And then in
I've
There's no
had
crossover.
No luck with the large landowners in Montrose County. The one that or not Montrose County, Erie County, the one that I did have on the board almost never showed up. For the weed
You're
board.
talking adding some Montrose County.
Does
Right.
Montrose have a CWAB?
They do,
Oh, okay.
and I can't say they do now. You know, Montrose, after we split, they didn't have a program over here for, I don't remember how many years. And then they did put together a decent program. And what they've done in the last several years, I'm not sure. I think Justin is still
Justin.
still there.
Yes,
Um,
it's Justin and Hannah, and I can't remember the other guy's name. There's
But-
3 of them now. in
Yeah, but
Montrose
they
County.
put together a really nice program, you know, and with decent equipment and everything. I don't know how they talked Montrose County into such things, but they did.
I'm just throwing this out as an option, trying to figure out some way to combine these two counties, because the weed problem doesn't understand any county lines. And there are people in Montrose County that would be interested in fighting weeds.
Well, it'd be very interesting to see if we could do Montrose County and San Miguel County and maybe even Uray County. That would be interesting. I mean, they do cooperative weed management areas.
Mhm.
Be an interesting concept to see if we,
I think politically that would open the door for the commissioners in Montrose County to be interested in this problem over here, this weed problem.
Mhm.
Well, they could
if-
serve, I mean, they could attend our meetings and serve as in an advisory capacity. Sorry, Nance, go ahead.
I guess it's just, I love the idea of trying to get into Montrose County, but I'd like to bring it back to the discussion of our board as it exists right at this moment, if I could. And, Sheila, I understood that you maybe had someone that was also
Yes,
interested.
Milt Spoor, who worked for me, for, I don't know, 3 or 4 years, and then was over with the fairgrounds for several years before he retired. Is interested. You know, he's a small landowner. I don't know what he's got, 5, 10, 20, I'm not sure. But it's in San Miguel County.
Right.
So, anyway, he's interested. So if it says a minimum of 5 members, that's different than 5 members.
I would have to check the statute.
Yeah, we'll
I
have to
don't
check.
recall off the top of my head.
But if I can also just point out that Milt is also a resident of Norwood, of which we have representation. So it'd be
Mhm.
nice to get somebody from the East End.
Absolutely, absolutely. Well, I guess, my thoughts are, just to kind of move things along, we can discuss this more if we need to, but we have an interested candidate. Milt has not applied at this point. I would suggest, or maybe I need to make a motion that we recommend to the BOCC that we do accept Suzanne Chevens, even though she's not a large landowner, with the caveat that if we do have a large landowner or anyone else, we would welcome them with open arms, maybe as an alternate, or if they were a large landowner, broach that application at the time. But at this point, I would like to recommend to the BOCC that we do accept Suzanne for the moment, and if something else comes down the pike, we can address that.
I'll second that.
Great.
No, vote for it.
Okay, I vote for it too, since I made the motion, so, great, that sounds great, perfect.
So again, back to your board structure, the 5 members or the 4 members are you, I mean, who with the county? Who are your actual more board members?
Me,
Mhm,
Jim, you, and John Humphreys, and
okay,
now Suzanne Chevens once BOCC approves it. So that would be our 5 seats.
mhm. And then, you know, if you could have a representative, whether they're, mine were non-voting, you know, from each of the municipalities.
I think that would be fantastic, and maybe we could do some outreach to them to come to our, start inviting them, if it even means pick up the phone and say, hey.
I had Karen Guglielmone, you know, for years. And then I had, somebody from Trout Lake, you know, that was on for years. It was a small landowner, it wasn't a big landowner. And then I had Kelly,
From Mountain Village,
Mountain
yeah,
Village,
yeah.
And then, from Norwood, it kind of rotated in and out. But I usually had somebody at least attending the meetings.
That'd be great. I think the more people we talk to and the more relationships and networking, ideally, the more we can get done.
Karen obviously stepped down, so,
Is Karen still in the area?
I don't know, yeah, she retired.
Yeah.
Yeah.
and I, you know, have the new contact, from there, but I have a, person that I could think of that might be interested from Trout Lake. I could reach out to that
Yeah.
person, but.
It was Greg,
Henshaw?
no.
No, that's the only one I can think
Oh,
of.
Straub?
Yes.
Oh,
mhm.
yeah, he's
Yeah.
our point person.
So he was,
Up at
he
Trout
was a
Lake, yeah.
great board member.
You can
And,
talk to
you know,
him.
when I sprayed up there, he always he was my driver.
Mm.
So when I went out, Greg was my driver.
I think I still am talking to Greg on a regular basis, actually, but that was not who I was thinking of, but yeah.
Yeah. So, yeah, and then there was another fellow up there that was a little interesting, who wanted to participate a lot. He was always doing daisy pulls and, you know, congratulations on pulling, you know, another 50 pounds of daisies.
Nice. They're endless. They're a weedy flower, that's for sure. Okay, if we're good, excuse me. Julie, if we wanted, we have, discussion of enforcement mechanisms. Talk about the Colorado Noxious Weed Act statutes and Senate Bill 2431, which we've kind of, talked about at a couple other meetings, but,
What is that?
Senate Bill 2431 gives local authority to have a little more enforcement mechanisms.
Okay.
Down to the point where you could take it to the district court and stuff. But I think
Is that a rewriting of the
it
one that
just
was?
wasn't it 2 years ago, year and a half ago that they just passed that?
Real
Legislation.
recently.
It was real recent, just trying to give a little bit more teeth to counties
Mhm.
to have some enforcement mechanisms to actually do something about things. You can't take it to court and all that
Mhm.
kind of stuff. Write ordinances and things in local municipalities that would give you a little more, legal.
Who's, at the state level now? Who's your
Patty York.
Patty?
State
Okay,
youth board
well, Patty's
member,
been there long.
So Julie, wanna take it off from here? You have,
Yeah, I highlighted a few things in the packet here. I highlighted basically, they talk about Patty York's role. And, you know, the Colorado Department of Agriculture and their role in providing some financial resources to the county through the noxious weed funds, to be able to tackle some of these A-list species and, B-list species in the county. And then I also highlighted the duties of the local governing bodies, the BOCC, and their role in enforcement. And then I highlighted the duties of the affected landowners or occupants. It's important to realize that this mandate isn't just for the county. It's also meant to apply to landowners as well. I understand that, the noxious weed fund in and of itself is supposed to provide financial resources to carry out some of these things, not in a enforcement mechanism, but just as a, hey, I can help you to the local landowner and I have the funds to do so if, the cost of managing noxious weeds is prohibitive for you. That noxious weed fund in the past has been at $700,000. Now there's 64 counties in Colorado, and 64 divided into 700,000, I think, is around $10,000 if they were to give each county that money. But that noxious weed fund just got cut to $450,000. So in the past, I haven't necessarily applied for San Miguel County because I am not aware of a state A-list in the county. Maybe we have elevated priority species here for sure, but not a state A-list here in the county. I usually in Uray County get somewhere in the neighborhood of $7,000.
What is your A-list species?
Meadow knapweed and myrtle spurge. We have two of them. And then we have leafy spurge, which is an elevated species in Uray County. And we have probably 1,000 acres.
A leafy spurge? Up on the mesa.
Miller Mesa.
Yeah, that was a spot. I mean, that's been going on for, the last 20 odd years.
Well, and it's just interesting to me that I reached out to a couple of those landowners 2 years ago and was spraying up there for those landowners, and I don't know who it was. I don't know if it was NRCS or somebody, but the ranch manager out there told me that representative from whoever it was, I asked several times, came out and told them that the property was wonderful and there weren't many weeds on the property. And my response to that was, well, who'd you talk to? Because I need to show them what leafy spurge is, because it's everywhere. I don't think they understood what leafy spurge was. I don't think they knew what it was. So.
Well, we've had a little bit of leafy spurge here in various just little small spots that we've worked on. Again, years ago.
Right.
And it's gone now.
I don't know. I haven't looked at those spots.
We'll have to talk later and you'll have to tell me where those spots were.
Spotted knapweed, we had just isolated spots that, we made our criteria, and the same with cinquefoil. We had isolated areas of cinquefoil that we elevated.
In 2020, we found leafy spurge at the base of Norwood Hill. But as far as I
That's
know,
been
it's
there for a
gone.
long time.
As far as I know, it's gone.
On that private property there.
So how did he respond when you told him that?
He got very quiet. He got very quiet. And I said,
Super.
I sprayed the property in 2023, and then we weren't able to do it again in 2024, but we will be doing it again this year. So.
Yeah, leafy spurge is a big one.
So it sounds like, you're working on the weeds and everything, but, we were talking about the enforcement and, I guess it feels like we don't have a lot of staff and things to do enforcement. It seems like we're more proactive in just trying to get as much spraying and working with landowners rather than the enforcement route.
So what is your staffing?
So the enforcement route, you're well aware of how I have to be able to see that and how I have to go about it and how you have to send out certified letters. So I have to be able to either be on somebody's property and, by permission of the landowner, and see the neighboring property and realize that it's there. That's one way. Or I have to see it from a public right of way. There's a lot of people that aren't, even though we offer the service when I come out and I tell them what they have on their property and we don't charge for that. There's probably a lot of people who are maybe a little fearful of asking me to come out, because if there is something on their property, they would be fearful that the county would issue a lien against their property. So, that's a process, and that has to go through the board, as you're well aware. If I see violation, that has to go through the board, and that has to be a decision they make. If there is an enforcement, if we get to that point where we are doing enforcement, we have discussed this in previous meetings, that there is a concern about certified licensed applicators
Mhm.
in the area that can come out and do it. There is a concern about the staff that I have normally. I'm very lucky this year to have 2 seasonals coming on board. First time in 6 years that I've had 2.
That's it, too.
So are
Yeah.
they here or on the other side?
thankful
No,
for
in
2.
San Miguel County, I will have 2 seasonals this summer.
That's
Your
great.
budget is for 2.
Correct. It's the first time that's happened in 6 years. So, we've talked about that. If the county were to step in and do that enforcement, because we don't have a lot of applicators. I've spoken to West Rushings, who is here in Norwood, and, agreed that we'll follow procedure that if somebody asks me for that service before we get to the enforcement mechanism, or if we do get to the enforcement mechanism, that I would allow him to pick up that contract first before I would step in and do it. So I'm not competing with his business.
So you do some private land application?
We're not here. We're not doing it yet in San Miguel County. We've discussed it in previous meetings about whether or not, for example, in Uray County, we have just a liability waiver. And if a private property owner contacts me, I can go out and do the property for them if they sign the waiver. We didn't get that far here in San Miguel County. We were discussing it, but it always came down to
Staffing.
staff
Mhm.
and
Is
my
that
not having
something you
staff.
would like to do this year?
Potentially, now that I have 2 seasonals on board, yeah.
So what
But-
species would you do that for? Would you?
I don't have a strict criteria on what I'll do that for. I mean, I might not necessarily prioritize anything that's C list,
Mm.
but or the A or Bs, sure, yeah.
Have you ever taken anything in front of the board as far as complaints and issues to be enforced? Have you, since you've been here?
I've had quite a few complaints on Hastings Mesa, quite a few,
Is Mark Zabel still up there?
yeah,
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
yeah.
Them too.
Yeah, I've had quite a few complaints on that, and then I've had quite a few complaints from people on Last Dollar Road over the US Forest Service trails up there. So those are the ones that I've had.
But have you ever brought them in front of the board? Or has it just been internal with your department?
Just pretty much been internal.
And I think, yeah, and just to add to your point and your comments, and I think Nancy, I think most of our conversations with county commissioners, as far as complaints like that, have been more broad in scope, those discussions, just as far as how best to handle them, from neighbors complaining about neighbors, and then the overall, infamous enforcement factor. So I think, it's just been more broad in scope, not identifying, Joey and Susie and who lives where, but just the situation at hand and that issue unto itself.
I think that what I have done in the past is when I've got somebody that's complained and been very concerned about it, I have encouraged that resident to write a letter to the
Mhm.
BOCC and, discuss their concern. I think it might carry more weight and might get a little bit more of a response if it comes from the landowner. I can say that to them, I've received 15 complaints on Hastings Mesa, but
I'm sorry, I don't use the acronym BOPC.
BOCC,
Board of County Commissioners.
Board of County Commissioners. Yeah.
Well, so, I guess, what are your thoughts as far as enforcement then, as far as your department goes? Like with what we have, now you have staff and stuff, or would you like to put your efforts more into just preventive stuff rather than going through? I don't think that the county has a huge appetite to put liens on property or anything like that. I think that they would be more of a proactive, what can we do to help? Get some spraying, get the word out, what are our options, what is the resources? So even with, the Senate bill and these other things, it gives the local authority more. I don't feel like, I know the BOCC has had discussions about code enforcement. So I'm looking to you, like, what would you like to see? Or do you feel like the energy is better put in proactive things rather than enforcement energies?
I think that you're gonna get more flies with honey. And I think it's better to try to be proactive. We put this out that, hey, we're gonna help you identify noxious weeds. If I see them on private property, I can write those letters. The letters that are required by the state of Colorado are pretty threatening. You know, they just say, hey, you got 10 days to contact us, and if you don't, we could potentially issue a lien on your property. So I would say the majority of the time when I send those out, 98% of the time, I don't get a response from them at all. Especially if it's a landowner or an LLC or somebody who's out of state, you know, or something like that. So, you know, I'm not necessarily sure, because if I send those letters and I don't get a response to them,
But I think
you
too,
know,
though,
sometimes I'm more likely to get a response from whoever the caretaker is, whoever the ranch manager is of that property.
Legally, when you don't get a response, you can up the pressure, right?
We could, but in the past, you haven't really had staff or resources to follow through on that, is my understanding, right?
No, I have not.
What
In
about,
other words, budget.
exactly,
well,
well,
no,
and just, it's not necessarily
It's been
budget,
hiring.
it's finding people, I think.
funding is there, yeah, it's.
What about if, when you send those letters, you added a supplemental letter saying, hey, we have these resources where, you know, we have the cost share program and I can come out and do these things like you've done before. But with that state required letter that's kind of threatening, more of a friendly letter saying, hey, I've got these resources, we could do this.
Well,
I
And that's
think,
what I was gonna say with the survey, I mean, being proactive, it has been more of an educational approach.
Right.
Like, let's make the community and the county residents aware of the services we provide so that it is more of a hand-holding mechanism, like, hey, we've identified a problem, let's help you fix it. You know, instead of smacking them on the wrist, like, what are you doing? Let's help you identify this and fix it. So I think it's more of a proactive approach in
Right.
that respect.
but on a side note too, that, you know, I believe honestly, I could have a full-time enforcement person doing this 40 hours a week, just doing this and talking to people. And those certified letters right now, one letter is $5. And if I sent out a bunch of those, that is a budget item that we would be discussing at that point. And if I included another less formal letter, then that cost is gonna go up. Because the state letter has to go out certified mail. That's a requirement.
Well, you're already sending a letter certified mail, so we could put another piece of paper in there.
Yes, but I don't know if that's probably by weight. So
do
the more
you-
pieces
do
of
you-
paper in there, the more
do
the
you
cost.
To use the exact language of the state.
But you could add a supplemental letter, there's
Yeah.
nothing that says you couldn't add a.
Correct, but the postage will be higher at that point, I think.
Well, but you budget for it, I mean, is it
Yeah.
really that much?
Depends on how many letters you send
Well, you
out,
said
and
you
it's
had
not
like
really
a-
a part of my budget line
Right,
item.
but as I recall, you had maybe 60 letters, you said, I don't remember the exact number, but it wasn't like anything that would break the bank, and
Right.
I know the commissioners have given you more money when you ask for the cost share and stuff, so I don't think that that's something that should be prohibitive budget wise, as far as, I don't know.
Depends on how many letters I send out at this point.
Right.
So, I mean, but you would only be going after your A-list species, which you don't have, and your B-list species. You wouldn't be, Canada thistle would not, you're not sending letters for musk thistle or Canada thistle.
My understanding is those are B lists, both of
Are
them.
they, okay.
Yeah, I
'cause
mean,
those are-
something like,
yeah.
like cheatgrass is
Yeah,
a C-list species,
yeah,
I mean, you know,
I can't
so,
remember the
yeah.
list anymore. It's been a while.
Okay.
Well,
Well,
but if you send the letters, I mean, that's why years ago I never sent the letters because, and it was a different process, but I didn't have the capacity to follow through, which is what you're saying.
I don't either.
Yeah.
Yes.
So it's hard to threaten if you don't have the
You-
ability. to
It's
follow
not just
through.
my capacity and my staffing to follow through, it's the procedure that we have to go through and the VOCC approving this as well. It's not just one
Yeah,
thing.
the capacity, I just want to understand what that.
Well, we talked about that earlier, and I did request a list of all the licensed applicators in San Miguel County and Uray County. Came back with a list of about 7 of them. I contacted everyone that I could contact because that list doesn't necessarily have their phone number. I went through and I contacted them either via email or phone number when I could. Joe DeStefano is in the area, but I spoke with him personally and he's not able to do large tracts of land. He doesn't have the equipment. And then there was another gentleman on there, who is, his name I'm forgetting at the moment, but anyway, so Wes Rushings is here and he can do large properties, but he also had a staffing issue. He told me last year, his mother at 75 was helping him because he couldn't find any help. Austin Shelby is in Uray County and he is doing weed spraying, but it's kind of not his specific, doesn't encompass his entire business. He's a forester and does other things.
You know how much brushing, right?
I don't know, but
Looking for a job.
one of the things he told me is that he's only hiring people for about 2 or 3 months. And so he has, an issue trying to hire people because nobody wants a job for 2 or 3 months. He's gonna probably be looking at college kids or something coming back for the summer for that kind of thing. And then there was another applicator out there, said Thomas McIntosh, but he is in the same situation as Joe, where he's just doing real small properties and doesn't have the equipment. So we're talking about basically myself, and we're talking about Wes Rushings that have the ability to basically do anything probably around 10 acres or more at this point.
Within that word capacity,
Yes,
it'd be Rushings and yourself
correct.
and budget.
Well, and staff, yeah, if we have a staff to do it, well.
You're not limited by budget?
Well, yes, I am limited, but I'm
But
also
not
limited
as
by
limited.
bodies. So, yeah, I mean, if San Miguel County had a process where we had, for example, a waiver and that cost went to the landowner potentially, then no, it isn't a budget issue because it would be a revenue source. If we are talking about trying to get money from the state through the Noxious Weed Fund, then we're talking about somewhere maybe in the neighborhood of 7,000, but that's if the state gives me that money without any A-list species in the county.
And you said you weren't applying for that money.
We don't have an A-list here, so I wasn't applying for it because I don't think they're gonna prioritize San Miguel County.
Leafy spurge has got to be in the list.
It's an elevated list in Uray County. It is not an A-list. It is a B-list species by the state. But it is elevated as a priority species in Uray County.
Back years ago, the state did give money for elevated B-list species.
Correct.
And they didn't have the budget. I mean, I can't remember what the state's budget was then.
Mhm.
I was on that board for quite a while.
Mhm.
And I mean, even cut, it's more than they had then.
Right.
But they weren't unwilling. Like I got quite a bit of money for my Cinquefoil project and.
I'm not saying they're unwilling.
Yeah.
I'm just saying that the chances of getting that money are better if we have another A-list that we have to tackle.
Well,
Yeah.
get some seeds.
No, I don't, no.
Well, this has been a great discussion, but I guess the whole point was the enforcement mechanisms, and it sounds like we're kind of not putting the focus necessarily on the enforcement mechanisms. So my board have any ideas or any suggestions, or should we move on to our next?
Yeah, I mean, I just say that, unless you are, 'cause we went through this years ago, but unless you're willing and able to force the enforcement issue, I think your energy is best spent elsewhere.
Mhm.
Yeah.
I would agree.
Sounds like a logical conclusion.
I think unfortunately, an option.
Well,
We did put that notice in the paper that you were talking about at the last week board meeting about just saying, hey, this is a law. You are supposed to be doing this and there could be a potential of a lien on your property. That was put in the paper.
would you guys want to bring it up to the Board of County Commissioners that you want more enforcement? I mean, Jim, that sounds like kind of where you're leaning, but
I'm not leaning toward enforcement. I'm leaning toward having it as an option when somebody is just. It sounds like the leafy spurge problem was like that. You need to be able to get somebody's attention. It's like hit them up alongside the head and.
That's not an enforcement thing in your.
I know that.
It's a
I know.
noxious weed fund
But I
project.
Yeah, and I think maybe at our next meeting, you know, we will have appointed Suzanne Chevens by then. So from the PR standpoint, or at least communication with the public, education opportunities. And maybe we invite Maura, who's our new county attorney, just to get more, maybe like her perspective on the legal options, ramifications, et cetera, before going back to the county commissioners, just so that we pursued certain avenues. Because a lot of times we might go back to the county commissioners who are like, help us figure this out, or what do we do? And I think we've had that conversation with them too many times now. So I think maybe we need to just come with a clear-cut direction.
I think if you had it in place for, sooner or later, you're gonna get an A-list species, it's
Yeah.
gonna show up.
Mhm.
And having it in place, already worked out through your county commissioners and ready to go when that shows up, when somebody brings that bale of hay from Delta County with the star thistle in it, or, you know, all of that. It's probably here someplace, you just, you know.
It
don't have
isn't
to-
in a place that I have seen it
Mhm.
as the county representative, or in a place where I've had a homeowner come and talk to
Right.
me and ask me what they have on their property. But yes,
It's a big county.
it's a big county. It could be here for all I know. Yeah. There's Purple Loosestrife that's just on the border between Montrose County and San Miguel County, and Justin's aware of it, but it's right there. So.
Well, and Purple Loosestrife, there's a whole history with Purple Loosestrife in Nucla.
Right.
And then Dalmatian toadflax has shown up in various places over the years. And then it goes away, and then it shows up someplace else.
It showed up
mostly,
2 or 3 years ago on
Oh.
Mine Creek.
Green Mine Creek Trail.
And I haven't seen it since, but
Yeah, it's an easy one to get rid of as long as you know it's there, but
Mm.
it's, every place I ever found it, it had fallen off of a vehicle. That's all there was to it. Yeah, it was on the roadside.
So, I did talk to Maura, because she's my boss, a little bit about, what mechanisms and things that we have. And the discussions have been also, with planning in the building department and violations and stuff too, again, and it goes back to code enforcement and staff. And then legally, do we have the bandwidth? Is the legal department follow through, taking it all the way to district court, putting liens on properties and stuff? It's maybe a lower priority. I don't mean that it's less important, but as far as county business and the attorney staff is a staff of 2. That's maybe not as practical as some other avenues of putting the energy in, as far as.
A whole lot of carrots, find your carrots.
Exactly,
Find your
exactly.
carrots.
Are there any counties we can look to that have a good enforcement program?
As far as maybe Julie can answer this too, but as far as I know, the bigger counties, like Denver, Arapahoe and stuff have the resources to do
La
that.
Plata had for a long time.
I've
They
only
did
heard of it on the
enforcement.
Front Range at this point. I've heard a couple counties in various different meetings saying they enforce, but they're all on the Front Range.
And what do they just have an enforcement officer dedicated solely to noxious weeds?
No, I think probably they're kind of well aware of where this stuff is after several years, but yeah, they're basically they find the property, they know that it's there, and they're hiring a contractor to go out and spray, which is what we were discussing earlier. And there's a mechanism in the Colorado Noxious Weed Act for that, where the county can also impose, a little bit of an upcharge on that for our effort in doing this. So they're hiring a contractor to do that. Their county staff is not doing it. So,
And some municipalities have ordinances and things also that add teeth. Like a local ordinance that
Mhm.
says, you do this, there's fines, there's things like that. I believe Montrose has some more, I'm not sure if it's just a junk ordinance or if it's an actual weed ordinance, but some of them have.
What about the smaller counties like us? Like what's everyone else doing?
I
And if
don't
it's
know
not enforcement,
anymore.
is it a carrot thing? Like
No.
what else are they doing?
Archuleta and La Plata used to have some programs, and I don't, again, I don't know. the
yeah, and Montezuma, as
management.
far as I know, doesn't have a weed program anymore, but then I saw a blip from somebody from Montezuma recently. They're trying to get the county weed, personnel meetings going again so that we can all get together and discuss, you know, what's going on and, how we move forward and how all the county weed managers,
That's not my understanding.
educate people. Yeah. And
Can't help you with the county just south of us. Hmm?
Dolores?
Yeah, Dolores County,
I mentioned Montezuma though.
they're on it. They're,
Well, that's
They're
beef
addressing the
farmers there, I mean.
it's agriculture,
Mhm.
Mhm.
and, you know, they've got a program in place where there's, somebody doesn't control their weeds. The county takes care of it. I agree, the carrots, the better option. You know, the idea of finding somebody who's willing to let you do a 40-acre parcel just to show what you can accomplish and you know, a whole range of steps that you could take to educate people. But unless this is addressed aggressively, agriculture in this area, this county is gone.
Yeah, well, our drought situation for this year is gonna,
We're at 80%.
of what?
The snow tail up on one.
Sit in the shade of that one tree.
You know, it's summer, you know, it's June in March, but.
Yeah.
I mean, it's pretty scary, but, you know.
I mean, that's gonna change, I mean, the drought of 2002, you know, changed my program markedly because you got into summer and you couldn't, there wasn't anything to spray. And the weather was such that, you know, you couldn't be out there when it was 90 degrees and, you know, the wind blew a lot. And, you know, so that was
What year
yeah.
was that?
2002. And then the grasshoppers after that, and, you know, that was, I almost left the area.
Yeah, that was weird.
It was a bad couple of years, and I think we're there again.
It sure
So
was.
just planning, you know, your program around
Yeah,
that.
we had quite a few grasshoppers concerns a couple of years ago too.
Mhm.
So.
Okay, well, that was a great discussion. What do you say we move on to the next item? Does that sound good?
We come to any conclusion.
Not
Hard
exactly.
decisions.
I think we've tried to move forward with this survey to educate people with this noxious weed letter that's in the paper. We've gotten that out there that I'll come and help these people identify these weeds if they don't know what they're dealing with. And I think we are moving forward. I just don't, I don't know how many people we're really reaching.
So
I
what
think
is your
that's the issue right
social
now.
media presence?
Well, I don't really handle social media. I
Well, that's
usually
what
look to
Suzanne-
for that.
could
Suzanne
possibly
handles
help
that
us
for the
with
counties.
Social media that people here see are the Norwood, what's it called, Norwood Classified or something like that.
Right.
And
Collective, I
the,
think.
you know, and Facebook and
Mhm.
all of those, that's where if you can get your information out and then people comment on it and it spreads around, that seems to be the most effective control, you know, information, way of getting information where you want.
And we did talk about that at the last meeting of getting that out in those specific publications and also of the Weed of the Month posters.
Even
That's
just
for
putting
people
something
who
in the
aren't on
post
social
office.
media.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, and the new bulletin board that
Mhm.
Lone Cone Legacy Trust funded, I'm on that board too.
We had that on the last meeting.
You know, there are, I mean, a number of places right there where you get the bigger, the more colorful, you know, people actually look at that message board. And I don't know whether there's anything like that in Telluride anymore. There used to be the one, you know, on
I think
Main
there's
Street.
one or two, there's still that one on Main Street.
Yep.
Yeah, so we used to make sure that we stuck one up there.
Yeah.
They didn't last very long, you know.
Yeah,
they
but
got
that might be
covered.
something, Julie, that you and your staff might.
We've been putting them on, you know,
Noxious
Parks
weed-
and Open Space have gotten kiosks at a lot of the
Well,
trails. We put those
Greg
out.
handles
Yeah,
that.
he handles that.
And
And
Active
I've
Suite of the Month, we
been
put
putting
them
them
on.
up here.
I think I have 10 locations until you're right, I put it out.
Oh,
Yeah.
nice,
Yeah.
good, okay, perfect.
Another one I was working on when I quit was, the trailheads and talking about, stickers in your socks. You know, I had a little poster, I can't remember where it went, but that was on the trailheads about, you know, don't just pick those stickers out of your socks, put them, you know, put them in your pocket, take them home. And, you know, that was a trailhead issue.
But you did some things back then, education wise, that were very effective. You had some seminars with
We did.
professors from the CSU and.
I went to a couple of your
Yeah.
CSU things,
Yeah, we
yeah.
had quite a few. And the other thing, you know, is getting your landowners participating. And I don't know whether this is something that can be done or should be done, but we used to do the applicators training. And every year, and actually some years I had 20, 25, some years, get their applicators licenses. And, that gave them access. A lot of it was for prairie dogs, but gave them access to, you know, stronger chemicals for, knapweed in particular. That's the big one. And I used to do those in Redvale, so I was grabbing from both counties. And just kind of it worked in the education along with them getting their licensing.
Was CSU holding a training when you were, the county weed manager?
Mm-mm.
So they do hold one every year and they went through
Yeah.
that. So that's another avenue too, you know, I mean, applicator training.
Oh, okay.
That
So
would be
they
a neat
took
outreach
that
thing
over.
that you could put on social media, since we have no applicators in the area, to say, hey, guess what, there's this program with CSU.
Yeah, well, that's private applicators, but that
But
allows.
I mean, just nonetheless, just like, you know, if you're interested in knowing this is a resource.
Yeah, there's a distinction, obviously, between private applicators and
Mhm.
commercial applicators.
Right, but I'm
so,
just
yeah.
saying, if there's no commercial applicators, then let the
Yeah.
private applicators.
And it's not even that they use a lot of restricted use chemicals, because they don't.
They don't,
You know,
yeah.
there's not a lot, there's some bare ground agents and there's Toradol for, you know, but it's that training and the education and then they used it for prairie dogs, you know. but-
So, yeah, I mean, the reason to get a license is if you want to use the restricted use chemicals. You don't need a license to apply anything else as long as it's not restricted use. So they don't, a private applicator doesn't necessarily have to have a license unless they want to use the
But it
restricted
was
use.
good education.
Good education, but they
I
don't
guess that
have
was
to have
more my point in the
Yeah.
outreach and just another resource to the public.
And getting it to the ag producers.
Sheila, another thing you did, which I thought was very effective, you had equipment where people could borrow that equipment and go spray their own property.
Yep.
That was,
I still loan out backpacks.
Yeah.
That
Yeah.
hasn't changed, yes.
And letting people know that that's available, through all the different, you know, media, and frequently, you know, but yeah, at one time we had,
I don't loan out ATVs, but I
Yeah.
loan out backpacks.
we had two 25-gallon, ATV sprayers.
Mhm.
And we had 10, I think, or 12 backpack sprayers.
Mhm.
And here's what, I broke a few laws once or twice.
Here, you tell me.
But you're tortured.
Speak louder.
Be careful now, you.
Oh, yeah, we'll talk about that. But,
Please fix.
you know, we did get people out there doing their own work and, you know, renting the sprayers. But that was, again, talk about manpower,
Right,
keeping those sprayers cleaned and,
Mhm.
and.
Making sure you got them
ready to
back.
go and make sure they go out and come back and sometimes I asked for $10, sometimes I just loaned them. But it was very time consuming to deal with those, but I think it did a lot of good,
right.
you know,
you sold one to me.
I did. Yeah, when I see, you know, transferred them out, I would sell them.
Sure.
And we still do have the cost share, that hasn't
Mhm.
changed, and the money got increased
Mhm.
last year.
So
So
you have
Cost share
your
work.
5,000 as of last
Okay.
year, it went up, the Board of County Commissioners put more money in there. But I would say on an average year, I probably don't get 15 people asking me for cost share money.
It was much more effective when it was through the co-op. You know, you just go there and your name has been added to the list and
Yeah,
the co-op.
and again, that
gets-
was a very time consuming,
Mhm.
program.
Was it?
The part of the reason that's changed a little bit is because as a government entity, I can get these things at a lower cost.
Hmm.
So by getting them at a lower cost, and that cost share money goes further
Mhm.
for our people in the county. I'll just give an example. You go to the co-op, Milestone's gonna cost you somewhere in the neighborhood of $100, maybe more.
But I
And
went
as a
five-
government entity, I get it much cheaper.
I went 5 years not knowing about that cost share.
Yeah.
Well, again, the outreach, social media and things like that, maybe we can reach out. We do have the cost share on another agenda item, so if we could go back. I have, item number 5, vegetation disturbance. That's kind of John Humphrey's
Mhm.
That's a big one. That's
item.
really a big one.
Do we want to open that up or should we wait for John's?
Well, just a really short recap. I mean, John is very passionate about the way Road and Bridge is grading roads and what they're doing to disturb those roads. And we've talked about this lots of times. I think the sticking point right now is where does the noxious weed plan for San Miguel County dictate what Road and Bridge does or does not do? I think that's our sticking point right now.
Well, I don't, Road and Bridge gives you money. And, I don't think that you guys can dictate what they can do. I just think you communicate with each other.
And we do.
And it sounds like you do. So, unless you guys have any more comments on that, we could.
And that's just an ongoing,
Yes.
issue.
I think so
It's
too.
Never gone
Pretty
away.
easy to control weeds along the road.
And I know that Julie and Road and Bridge have been working together and communicating.
But if they'll let you know about some disturbance, then having that communication would be real helpful. And I had that for the most part, not through, the head of Road and Bridge, but through each of their offices. So it was a little more ad hoc than something having to go through, and I can't remember his name now, but it was helpful to have one contact in each Road and Bridge field office, who would say, oh yeah, by the way,
Mhm.
the other day we did this and that. Or we saw something, the guys out in Egner used to every once in a while, because they were farmers too. And they'd call me and I'd say, there's a patch of because there was some leafy spurge out in Egner for a while. They'd cuss me out first and then let me know where.
There you
the
go.
problem was. It was my.
Well, cool. We maybe talk a little bit more about that if that's all amenable to you, especially because that's kind of John Humphrey's passion on that. Moving on then, Julie, we have update on the noxious weed agreements, the cost share program, and the America the Beautiful grant.
Okay.
And an update on.
The noxious weed agreements, we still have the same noxious weed agreements this year with the exception of town of Norwood. Randy Harris stepped up and said that the town would be handling it.
He got certified.
He did?
He was my former manager, so he was certified a long time ago. I think he dropped his license and then recertified, so, but he,
If
He's been through the training.
Well,
he's been through the training.
It's online there and, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, Norwood is, with the exception of Hoary Crest, I was dealing a lot more with obnoxious weeds than really noxious ones, so, I'm still doing Telluride gravel and we just still need to work on Telski at this point.
So are
So that's
those-
not an MOU, that was just a,
Right.
agreement with a waiver.
But all the MOUs that were out for signature are back. It's
Correct.
just these other ones.
Randy's pretty
So do they have a piece of equipment?
I don't know. I would assume so.
I do not know.
I mean, they've got ATVs and they've got, they water the flower pots and stuff,
There's
so.
there's oxide daisy in some of the flower pots here in town.
Oxide or
Really?
Shasta?
It's oxide.
Is it? Okay.
Oh, boy.
As we started discussing the cost share program, still the same as last year, still have the $5,000 in there. That hasn't changed. We've tried to put more PR out there with that survey, which we'll get to in the next couple bullet points here. America the Beautiful, we had received funding for approximately 2 weeks of the Conservation Corps to come out and do tamarisk removal on the west end. I did try to contact Bert with the Serengeti Foundation, and I tried to contact TJ, and I spent several months trying to do that. Didn't receive a response from either one of them. My original intention was to do something in Disappointment Valley, because it is just choking that entire creek. Pretty bad out there. When I didn't receive any feedback or a response from either one of them, we also discussed doing this in an area that would benefit the Gunnison sagegrass. So we turned to Dry Creek Basin. And I have been speaking to the working group. I've been speaking to Nathaniel with the BLM, and I've been speaking to Evan and other people with CPW. I've been attending the working group meetings, and we went and did a field tour and kind of did some mapping out there. So at this point, we're anticipating doing the work out in the basin at this point. There is concern from the Colorado Department of Agriculture that this funding might get axed. But right now they're kind of proceeding as we're going to get the funding. The deadline for the work is at this point, November 2026. Patty does not anticipate that they would get an extension of that, but that's still up in the air at this point. The funding came from the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, and supposedly the funds are still with that agency. So that's where we're at the moment.
So how much was that?
I think the award was somewhere around 4 million.
For
I think
Colorado or for?
for the San Juan Mountain Group for a bunch of different counties.
We
It
got
was
what, 40?
reduced. Yeah, it was reduced by like 30% or something like that. So San Miguel County's portion of it was basically enough to pay the Conservation Corps for 2 weeks.
Okay.
Come out and remove tamarisk. That was our portion of it.
Do we have to do reporting and stuff for that grant?
I've been doing the reporting. Nothing's really occurred yet, except what I discussed about site visits, trying to determine locations. I have received a letter of support from CPW to conduct work on their lands. Working on BLM right now. I'm trying to get their buy-in and their official letter of support. We've just been discussing when we're going to be able to get this group out. So originally we had planned on doing it in October, but CPW has come back and asked me to do it in August because of hunting season.
Mm.
And I have the same response that you did. I don't know if I want to be out there in August trying to cut tamarisk, but we're still working on it. I'll see if I can come back to them with some other things. I would rather not put it off until, March of next year because the deadline is November 2026. But for weather reasons, I'd probably rather be there earlier in the season than in August. So we're still
Well, they
working on
kind
it.
of shut down there in the middle of the summer, so your
Yep.
project isn't as effective.
Yep. So we're still working on it.
Okay.
We're still going around and around.
If I can just mention though, before we move on to number 7. So Julie, I just got an application from a local land trust for a land conservation easement in Disappointment Valley.
Oh,
So I actually was making notes about you today to share those details with you because
Okay.
we might have a landowner that, might be interested in participating in, noxious weed management. And then I don't know, are you on the email distribution list with Renzo Del Piccolo? Because I got an email from him.
the working group?
Yeah, they're
Yes.
meeting on April 4th.
Yes.
Okay, do you plan on attending?
Yep.
Oh, okay, perfect. I'm gonna be in Grand Junction that day, but I also shared it with the Open Space Commission.
I also released the tamarisk beetles in Disappointment, by the way.
Oh, yeah, when was that?
Last year,
Okay.
2023. And I've been out there several times to take pictures and document what's going on out there. So
Okay.
They move around pretty darn good, those little bugs.
Mhm.
Okay, that's good. Thanks for the update. And then, I understand you kind of touched on this, but you have full staff.
Yes. I have full staff in San Miguel County and I'm 90% sure that I will have a full staff in Erie County as well.
Great.
I hired a new assistant manager. I hired Josh. And he comes with a full license. Exception of turf, so he can hit the ground running and I'm very excited.
Where'd he come from?
He was on the Front Range for a while. And then he actually grew up in Montrose and has come back to Montrose in the last year and
So he lives in Montrose.
Mhm.
And,
Oh, good.
Yep.
with Joshua.
I think it's Hanson.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Hanson.
So he's not gonna live here.
No, he's a Montrose resident, but
She doesn't either.
Yeah, I know.
yeah,
Okay.
but I'm really excited because he's already got his license
Yeah.
and
And who's your,
He's
who's
hired
your,
for you, right, Kelly?
he's the assistant manager and he's gonna split his time just like I do.
And then your, other worker bees, when did they start?
I'm gonna have them on May 1st.
Perfect.
and who is that?
Stacy Trask.
Stacy Trask, she's coming from Montrose and she's happy to work in San Miguel County. And then I have another local girl who is in Red Vail named Elizabeth. Right?
Elizabeth Wood. Okay.
Her name is escaping me.
Okay,
I'm sorry, her
all right,
last name
that's
is
fine.
escaping me right at the moment. I'm bad with names.
All right.
Yeah.
Well, good. That's good news.
And they start May and they end when?
September, probably.
So, I mean, May, like, is, for this year, is gonna be a little late on White Top. White Top's gonna be,
That's why I have Josh.
yeah, I
We'll,
mean,
we'll get out before May.
White Top is,
Yep.
is going to start, it's already,
It actually has already
yeah,
started.
it's creeping under the walls of my greenhouse.
Yep,
As we speak.
yep. I was seeing spotted knapweed in Ridgeway in January.
Yeah, starting to just rosettes. Mhm.
Okay, then we have one more item, the noxious weed management survey update.
I have one more question.
Oh, I'm sorry, excuse me, please.
There, you talked about a 40-acre parcel that you're gonna donate to a property owner. Just as an example of weed control.
Wait,
Isn't there another
she was
grant?
talking about an
Was it-
a conservation easement.
Yeah, no, Jim, that's a separate item, but it's, I received yesterday an application from a local land trust for a land conservation easement in Disappointment Valley, which I was gonna, I mean, we keep all that confidential until I bring it to the county commissioners, but I was gonna share some details with Julie, just because she was mentioning the gentleman she, BVH, Bert, that she reached out to, he's in Disappointment Valley. So my point was to Julie was that I do have a potential landowner, homeowner there that might be interested or might need noxious weed management services when Julie was talking about the America Beautiful
So is he
grant
down?
and identifying, yeah, so.
It's a good opportunity to, you
Mm-hmm.
know, use that as a public example of what weed control can do.
And it's only a few thousand acres. I don't know if you have enough backpacks.
But I mean,
I don't
We're talking
backpack
about
1,000
that.
acres, ain't happening.
Kidding.
talking about the Tamara's control on that in Disappointment, or you.
If it were to work out.
Yeah.
Or potentially Russian knapweed.
Mhm. There.
The survey so far, I assume it's still running. It is still getting some
As far as I know.
press, okay. We only had as of March 17th, we've only had 20 respondents. And that hasn't changed. I actually have it up on my computer right now and can show you
Well, if you,
if you're interested, but
okay, I was gonna
Yeah.
say, if you click on it though, with the link, is it let you get in?
Could we run it in the paper again, the outreach that we have it? Because I think weeds are on people's minds a little more now.
Yeah, as it
than when
warms
you
up.
first put it out.
So is it all online or do you have a paper access to it as
Mhm.
well.
It's online.
Yeah.
I think most of the paper access things are kind of going away with the
It's just,
accessibility stuff.
But can we put it in the little ad in the newspaper that we have
I
the?
thought we did.
But
we did.
again, I'm talking about
Yes.
this spring.
I
Some
can
people
chat with Suzanne.
Yeah.
Paper,
well, it's,
and maybe hang some on the kiosk.
Yeah.
Well, and so going back to that right now, I mean, so 20 people, and of those 20 people, 75% of them said that, cost of managing noxious weeds is not a barrier for them. 100% of those respondents said that they are aware that managing noxious weeds is a state mandate. 65% that said that they believe that their neighbors are not managing their noxious weeds effectively, and 63% that said that San Miguel County should enforce. They should do enforcement on homeowners, so,
63%.
but it's of 20 people. So,
I would like to get
yeah.
a bigger,
And I would too. I'd like to, maybe present later, in this year, hopefully when I would love to see us get 100 respondents. I mean, that would be wonderful
yeah.
if we could get
Maybe
100.
if we do a little more outreach, put it back in the paper,
Mhm.
since it's still open, I think that would be great.
Yeah, I can
Some of
chat
your-
with Suzanne
your
tomorrow.
bigger landowners around here, aren't always going to be willing to do it online.
Okay.
And, I mean, that's just a reality,
It is.
of the older, landowners.
Right.
So if there's a way to have a paper option.
As long as it's not an issue with the accessibility things, I could print out a paper form, I could put it in the library, I could put it outside the office door.
They would
I
have
could do
to,
any
yeah,
of
they'd
those.
have to return it to you.
Yeah, well, I have a inbox and outbox.
Oh, no, I know.
Kind of thing, and I can do that at the library too, so, and
mean,
I can come pick it
It
up.
might grab you a few more.
Right.
If it's a paper
And
option.
maybe in tandem with some more advertisement about the cost share program at this point in the season also.
Okay.
Here's the survey, here's our cost share. Hey, look at us, we can help you,
Mhm.
kind of thing.
And then just another outreach thing, the Basin Forum
Mhm.
is becoming, with the new management down there, it is becoming the newspaper that actually has local stuff in it.
Oh, yeah, we advertise in
And
them.
for
a lot.
a long time, it was not so.
Right.
So with Reagan.
Reagan
she's
Tuttle is handling
doing
that.
a great
Mhm.
job there. So, outreach into that newspaper is.
And I mentioned that to Suzanne too, because we do utilize the forum a lot for items at the fairgrounds and stuff.
Yeah.
And RFPs relevant to the fairgrounds.
Yeah, she's doing a great job of
Yeah.
taking over something that was not a great job.
Cool. All right. Well, with that, any other comments, thoughts, plans?
I'd like to imagine an opportunity to combine the two counties into one weed control district.
You're talking Montrose and San Miguel.
Mhm.
Perhaps we could make a first step, reaching out to their weed board and having a joint meeting and talking.
Good idea.
So I did speak to Hannah, who's now working for Montrose County, when I saw her in February, and she's, to my knowledge, when I asked Justin, they don't even have a cost share program. That's what he told me in Montrose County. So I think she's trying to get one started. But we need to talk about that more because I have a sneaky suspicion that this cost share program for Montrose County is going to be me manning an office and me selling to Montrose County residents.
No,
Because, and I have an issue with that.
I have an
You know.
issue too.
Them wanting to offer it to Montrose, Western Montrose County, I think is fantastic, but I can't man that office for them.
You're not going to.
So, we'll see how that conversation unfolds.
I mean, they have more staff. They need.
Yeah, they have
to figure it out.
they have 3 people for 1 county. I'm not willing to man the office, so.
Mm-mm.
I spoke to one of the county commissioners in Montrose County, and my thought was to just find out where they stand. They're not even concerned about the West End.
Mhm.
It's not even in their.
Yeah, over the years, I mean, they really haven't come over here very much. I bet, I mean, over the years that when I see a truck going down the road, Montrose County, I see like once a summer or something. They're just not over here.
I just saw him coming down Norwood Hill when I came up today.
Cool.
There you go.
Although hearing about the current makeup of their board, I can't see where they would consider this a priority.
That would be really tough.
Mhm.
We did, I mean, it was combined for, a number of years until it just got untenable. It was not possible to work with Montrose County at that time. They gave me, I think it was the first year that I had a spray truck and was trying still to work with them. They gave me $3,000 and they wanted me to show them receipts for exactly $3,000 worth of spraying that I did at, whatever my rate was at the time, $50 an hour or something, but they didn't want to pay for any education, any outreach, nothing else. It was like, we want to see $3,000 worth of receipts for spraying. That was it. So we had our issues.
I didn't know that you'd had that.
Yeah, it worked,
Trial.
it kind of worked for kind of a while.
Well, and thankfully Julie has a great relationship with Hannah, having worked
Yeah.
together, so I guess you can just have those conversations and see what
Well,
potential possibilities exist.
and I talk to Justin on a regular basis, so it's not like I don't have communication. It's just I'm unwilling to man the office for a cost share for them when they have 3 people for 1 county.
Right, but we could still maybe talk.
Yep.
All right, anything else? Are we good to all this
So do you want to just confirm our next meeting date?
was?
So
June?
it is
12th.
June 12th at 4:00. Let me tell you.
Hey,
And I have no idea what I'll be June 12th, but I will put it on my phone.
perfect. All right, well, that, I'll call it adjourned, gang. Sounds good.
Well, thanks, everyone.
This will be fun to get, back on and pay some attention to it.
Yeah, here's the